Hello, friends. It's Binge O'Clock, the podcast where we watch something and then we talk about it. I'm Joyce Selden. I've seen almost everything.
And I'm Ethan Quincy, and I've seen things that are adjacent to this movie, but not this movie specifically.
That's right. It's Ethan and I, and we are here to talk about Dark City, the 1998 film, director Alex Proyas, who also directed The Crow, and the star-studded cast that is this movie.
Insane.
Kiefer Sutherland, Jennifer Connelly, Rufus Sewell, William Hurt, Richard O'Brien.
I have to tell you, I made an enormous mistake throughout this movie and was not able to rectify it until I finished watching the movie and then went to Wikipedia. I mistook Kiefer Sutherland for Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Honestly, I feel like that's easy to do.
Something about his hair and wardrobe in this film.
I feel like that's easy to do. Like you said, especially here. Especially here.
He doesn't look like he does in, 24.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he's just a baby here.
He's small. This is a weird movie.
It is. It is a weird movie.
Okay, so my first three notes about this movie are weird mid-90s sci-fi noir, 1930s The Matrix meets Fringe, and feels like somebody's endless nightmare. It has that nightmare I don't mean that's not a reference to the film itself. It's just it's got that nightmare quality where nothing makes any sense and it never ends. And there's always something chasing you.
Yeah. The reason this is one of my favorite science fiction... I'm not going to say one of my favorite... Danielle, I can hear you smirking. It is my favorite science fiction noir. I think because it has that mystery element and because the cinematography has a lot of really quick cuts, which makes you, the viewer, feel a little uneasy. Like they do a lot with just very short scenes and they never stay in one place. You know, they're always looking for other things in the room. I did actually make Ethan watch the director's cut of this film, which I do think is the superior cut. But we'll kind of get into why I think that later on.
Going back to what you were saying about the quick cuts, especially at the beginning, it was really... I wasn't sure if I was actually going to enjoy this movie because the cuts at the beginning were so quick and frenetic and almost like early 80s experimental music video kind of cutting.
Sure.
Just very disorienting, which was appropriate to the story.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a story about memory loss. In a sense.
Yeah, it's a story about literally waking up and not knowing who you are. There's a kind of memory loss that's I forget what it's called. There's levels of memory loss where it's okay, you understand language and you understand certain facts about the planet, but you don't know anything personal. And that's sort of where we're going with this one, although we'll get to the facts about the planet later. You mentioned The Matrix and you mentioned Fringe, which 100% is the building blocks are there.
Weirdly, I forget where I saw my first reference to this movie, but it was right around the time that I was watching Fringe for the first time. And I basically just saw pale, bald men. And I'm like...
Right?
I'm like, goth observers?
I mean, a little bit.
A little bit.
They're a little more murdery here.
They're a lot more murdery. That same kind of just messing with people and messing with the world. For kind of similar reasons.
The rooftops that Murdoch runs across are the same ones that Trinity runs across in the beginning of The Matrix.
Okay.
Some of the same buildings and exteriors were used for both films.
Okay.
Because they were kind of filming around the same time, because Matrix took a long time in post-production.
But
so they would have been filming right around the same time. It's very fun to be this one technically came first, but I think it was a very zeitgeist thing at the time.
Yes.
You can also watch The Crow, which Alex Proyas also directed, which is very proto-Matrix style.
I mean, but going back to Fringe for a second, the other thing I had written down was... this is a film that asks the question, what if an observer downloaded a serial killer?
Yeah.
Into their brain.
It 100% answers that question. Also kills the observer, which I do think is very funny. Because
yes, although we don't see it kill him on screen.
I know. Well,
It's
the observer that does actually die in Fringe, it like dies because he has an emotional connection, which I also think is very funny.
mm-hmm,
I really like how here's where it gets very important in the version I had you watch,
mm-hmm.
because the biggest difference, there's about 10 minutes difference between the theatrical cut and the director's cut, but the biggest difference is actually a stylistic choice that they removed from the theatrical cut, which was a voiceover in the very beginning of the film, which is, the Schreiber speech when he's in the boat and talking about the first there was darkness.
Yes.
It's a version of that slotted into the very beginning of this movie, and it literally gives everything away.
Oh.
And I watched this movie in theaters and still enjoyed it, but once I found out that the director's cut removed that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a much better film. Like, you're no longer sitting there expecting aliens. Like, it was a very, like, welcome to the Twilight Zone, and, like, you already know to look for weird stuff.
Yeah.
And so instead it just kind of drops you into the weird.
Yeah, because the film, it's almost like a video game opening in a weird way, because
Right?
your main character, who is played by Rufus Sewell, wakes up in a bathtub in a bathroom.
Yep.
And he has no idea of who he is or where he is or how he got there. And so the film starts as a thriller, and it's like a 1930s-ish, kind of setting, except you have, like, a little bit later on, you have Jennifer Connelly singing sort of 80s and 90s pop standards as though they were 1930s jazz songs, like slow jazz, slow club jams.
I think Sway is older than that. But the second song she sings, I don't think it is. I'm pretty sure Sway is from the 60s.
Well, still,
if I'm not mistaken.
Not 1930s.
Yeah. No, and they do eventually have an explanation for that, which is that, everyone's memories have sort of been sucked out of their heads and just decided to mix and match. So the entire city is just a mishmash of eras.
Yeah.
I love that, like, his car is also extremely not 1930s.
Nope. But it's the sort of thing that you don't quite notice at first.
Mm-hmm.
And you start off with this noir thriller that seems to be about a guy who is a serial killer, but he's lost all of his memories, and he doesn't know that he's a serial killer. And then suddenly these freaky-looking, white-faced, bald men in trench coats and fedoras show up and start hunting him, and it takes a turn into nightmare territory.
Yeah.
And then he zaps them with mysterious brain powers. And you're just like, what universe am I in? What genre am I in? And you have the doctor, who is played by Kiefer Sutherland, not Philip Seymour Hoffman.
No.
You have the doctor calling him in this bathroom, going, "You don't know who you are, but you have to run. I can help you, but they're coming for you." And it actually takes a while for the fact that it's a sci-fi movie actually to take hold. And I love that. I love that there's a reveal so much. And the thing is, I was surprised when we got to the scene of, what is the doctor's name?
Schreiber.
I was surprised when we got to that scene and he actually knows what's going on. I genuinely was kind of expecting this to just be one long exercise in nightmare fuel where you never find out what's happening.
I can see that being a kind of option for this too, because you definitely have elements, like, because you mentioned video game, right? There's a lot of motion in that. We already talked about the cuts and, like, the psychological thriller portion of it, but, like, there is a lot of motion in that scene. Like, you have the light swinging, you have the water dripping, you have him trying to get out of the tub and not fall and break his butt, like,
and then he breaks the goldfish bowl.
He breaks the goldfish bowl, it shatters, but he saves the goldfish, which I love. I love that he saves the goldfish.
That's like the first thing you see him do, which is a wonderful little establishing moment.
Yeah. It's a very much like oh no, I broke this. Let me see if I can fix it.
It's almost like Lenny from Of Mice and Men kind of level of Oh no, I need to fix it. And Jennifer Connelly is in this movie. I have never seen a movie that she's in that isn't weird as hell.
I mean, that's fair.
And I love that for her.
In a weird way, I feel like Mia Sara kind of passed this torch to Jennifer Connelly of just like, Jennifer Connelly was like too young in the 80s.
Yep.
And then she kind of hit her stride in the 90s of like, we're just going to do weird nonsense after weird nonsense.
Because, I mean, she did this and she did The Rocketeer. This is weirder than The Rocketeer.
Yes. She also did a very strange... Actually, you might like this one. It was a gothic horror movie.
For our millennial and older listeners, Jennifer Connelly is Sarah from Labyrinth with David Bowie.
Yeah. Another very strange
movie, kind of presaged this in a bizarre way.
Absolutely. Gosh, I'm trying to remember what it's called. Is it Phenomena? It might be Phenomena. She plays this like young, well, I mean, she is young. I'm pretty sure she's a teenager in that movie. But she comes to live in a house and the house is like huge and all this weird stuff starts happening to her and around her. But it had a very weird vibe because it was already like, I feel like they had Jennifer Connelly for only so many hours a day because she was a minor. So the scenes that they shot feel very disjointed and the whole, like the movie as a whole is just a very strange thing going on. But it was still weirdly interesting and probably just because Jennifer Connelly is great and has this weird like magnetism that I think you can just really tell whenever she's on screen. I know her from this actually because I'm trying to remember if I even like had the brain power for Labyrinth. Because, like, I watched Labyrinth as a small child, and it didn't really occur to me that it was, like, Jennifer Connelly. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I apologize. I watched this because Jennifer Connelly was in it. Because I was like, oh, my God, it's Sarah from Labyrinth. And, like, dragged my mom to the theater to go see this movie.
And then this just completely replaced Labyrinth in your brain as the origins of your love for Jennifer Connelly.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I mean... It's almost like she's a little bit more, well, obviously more adult, but she's a little more three-dimensional in this, I like to think. She definitely has that, like, feminine noir, like, filter of the femme fatale sort of over her. But I do think she's able to, she's able to play a lot more of the levels than I think makes sense. So the difference is, well, actually, real quick, listeners, if it's been a while since you've seen the movie or if you haven't seen the movie, basically John Murdoch wakes up without any memories, gets chased by a bunch of very white bald men, and eventually uncovers that it's not just him. The entire city he's in is, like, broken. There's something wrong. People are falling asleep weirdly, and then city is moving around them. People just suddenly have different personalities and different jobs than they were when you met him the first time. And he starts to unravel with him and his sort of avatar's wife of Jennifer Connelly's character, Emma, and Detective Baumstadt, played by William Hurt, who's amazing, the late, great William Hurt. I love that they all kind of try to unravel this together. But what you eventually find out is that a group of aliens at some point kidnapped a bunch of human beings, kept them on a ship, extracted all their memories, and then decided to play make-believe with them because they themselves are dying and they're trying to figure out the next evolution for their species. So they're swapping around memories, trying to find the soul, which I thought was very funny. I was like, I don't know if Schreiber came up with that of like, are you guys looking for the soul? Because that's kind of weird. Or like, if they knew what a soul was, which is also kind of weird.
I kind of wonder if it's just like the best way that Schreiber had to explain what they were looking for.
Sure.
When we get to Schreiber's explanation, which is like 3/4 of the way through, and we're just kind of realizing what the aliens that he calls the strangers are about, I had to stop the movie for a minute and think about it. And like, this is one of the most interesting takes on the classic sci-fi tropes of the human zoo. This one goes back quite a long time. The idea of an alien race that is dying and needs human help in some way, whether it be like active intervention or genetic material. Like, there's an old 50s exploitation movie that's literally called Mars Needs Women.
I think I've actually seen that. I don't know. Maybe it was a fever dream that I convinced myself that I've seen it.
It's so bad. There's a lot of them. But this is actually a really interesting take on that.
I love that it has some of the tropes and it splits its time pretty evenly between noir and science fiction. One of the biggest noir tropes for me is like a bunch of rain, just like a bunch of rain.
Yes.
And there's zero rain in this film.
It's a very dry
Not
city.
a single drop of rain.
Well,
not a single drop of rain until...
There's a reason for that.
Exactly.
There's a reason for that. It's because...
This is what I mean. Like, they've divided their time.
And it is because, like the Wicked Witch of the West, these aliens are allergic or phobic. They are either allergic to water or they are water phobic, but they don't like water. Which is also very funny because it's why the Dr. Schreiber spends so much of his time in a pool. His safe space is a swimming pool. And this is
absolutely. I love that for him. I'm glad that he actually has that.
They also hate light. So that is actually why it's a noir city. And it's never daylight. It's never daytime.
Yeah,
it is
the sun has never
never
risen. One of my favorite lines from this entire thing that really sums up that weird sort of like itch in the back of your brain where you know something's wrong, but you haven't necessarily questioned the world around you, is when John says, "When was the last time you saw the sun?" And I'm not talking about a childhood memory. I'm talking about like yesterday, the day before. When were you out in the daytime? When did you go out for a walk? And it's like you get to see Bumstat sort of think about it and go, huh, I don't remember.
And I don't like that you're asking me this question. Shut up.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like they're programmed to get very aggressive when somebody asks that question. There are a number of times where Murdoch is trying to get out of the city. You know, he can't because there is nothing beyond the city except space. But there is the other cop, the one that Baumgartner?
Eddie.
Yeah.
Eddie Walensky.
Yeah. That William Hurt's character replaced, who basically went stark raving mad because during what the strangers refer to as the tuning, they are telepathic and they have a giant, creepy looking, great and terrible head of Oz looking machine that amplifies all of their telepathic powers so that they can just shift the city around, grow the buildings, shrink the buildings, put new streets in however they want, and put everybody to sleep. And while everybody's asleep, Schreiber goes around with his steampunk-looking syringe full of memories. I'm very glad we never actually physically see the needle going into people because it's kind of implied that it's going through an eyeball.
Yeah, I think it's meant to be the very center of
it
between
is,
the eyebrow.
It is, but the way they shoot some of them, that is very much not where that needle is going.
Sure, fair. There was a lot more needle shots, I feel like, in the theatrical release. Not necessarily going in, but they're if I'm not mistaken, they built like a giant version of this needle so they could actually get like the optics of it extending and going back.
That makes sense.
Like instead of having a smaller prop, they just made it larger. And the idea of this being a very large needle, I'm like, oh, never show me this prop.
Nope.
Horrifying.
Just I'm going to pretend it's a microscope, like a giant electron microscope. But that's probably my favorite little bit of this world building is the idea that memory. That's the way. So how did Schreiber describe them? They're like paint. The memories,
you mix it up like so much paint.
Yes, and that the memories are basically treated as chemical compounds that can be combined or broken apart and extracted over and over again. And so Schreiber's going around with a doctor's bag full of these syringes, what they call it imprinting, I think. And just changing people's memories, sometimes their entire life story. Like there was one couple, it's a married couple with 2 little kids, and they lived in a tenement. And they're talking about the kids are asleep, and they're talking about their day over dinner. And then the tuning begins, and they are put to sleep, and they fall face first into their dinners. asleep.
Which I love.
It's
I love how campy that in particular was.
Yes.
Because it's like if you're putting a whole city to sleep, obviously someone's going to face plant into their foods.
Yes.
Like,
100%. And then you see the strangers and Schreiber working on this particular family, and they become wealthy. They live in a mansion.
Yeah, one of the elite.
One of the elite of the city, which has no name. The city has no name.
Which has no name.
It is the city. And the table they're eating at gets really long, like it's a banqueting table. And when they wake up...
Yeah, that's one of my favorite transitions is the small tenement into this big mansion. Lavish mansion. Incredible.
Yeah, it's wonderful. The special effects in this movie are interesting in that, like, 90s and the CGI is still new, and it's not like blocky,
cartoonish.
It's not blocky pixels anymore, but it's still not Uncanny Valley, and it looks It does not Uncanny Valley. It looks otherworldly, which is what it should look like in this, especially in this case.
I feel like they use it sparingly enough that you're not picking it apart so fast.
Yeah.
I will say the tuning ability that they have, where the air kind of warbles.
Yes, that looks a little comic booky.
Yeah, for a while, Alex Proyas was I believe he had the original idea and co-wrote the screenplay for this as well as directed it.
Yep.
I believe this is very far away from his original screenplay. You know, like he kind of put together like a hey, do you want to make this movie with me? 25 pages, whatever it is, where you kind of auction it off. I think that is pretty different from what we ended up getting. But when they were filming it, you'll notice that no one is actually making an action to tune.
No.
Like, even in the end fight, they're just kind of staring at each other. Like, there's no extra blank. There's no, they might be screaming, but it's like there's no focus point. And he realized later on that he was like, oh my gosh, I need to put something in so people understand that they are doing this to the world around them. Because originally he didn't have that. It was just like such a reflex, especially for Murdoch. Like, it's just such a reflex. Like, I don't even think he barely looks at the floor and then it just eats itself away. If you watch it again, you'll notice, like, when he creates the doorway, he barely looks at the wall he creates it on because he's just looking for escape.
Yep.
And
especially for Murdoch to start with, it's all very reflexive.
Yeah. But again, like, how do you show that in a film medium?
Yes.
And the answer for Mr. Prius was warbles, which I personally don't mind.
No.
I kind of like it gives me the impression of, how you can kind of see heat waves coming up in the summer? Like, that's what it gives me the impression of, which I really enjoy.
It is clearly meant to represent something like a force, a pressure moving the air. Not to draw any more comparisons between this and The Matrix than is necessary, but it's a little bit like the effect of the air moving around the bullets when they use bullet time in The Matrix.
Yeah.
It's something pushing the air.
It is a little bit like that. Definitely.
It's also very... It's like this is how we indicate telepathy in Silver Age comic books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's a good effect. I suppose it's a tiny bit cheesy, but there's always room for cheese.
There's always room for cheese. I mean, there is a part of me that's like, I feel like they understood the movie they were making.
Yes. Yes, they did.
Yeah, they had an understanding of what they were making and how they were making it. And for what it is, I believe they were I'm pretty sure they were trying to keep the budget relatively low because they also knew they'd have to do a lot of post-production with all the special effects and whatnot.
Yeah.
So they tried to keep like the shooting schedule pretty tight and the scenes pretty close and all that stuff.
This is from a story point of view, this is a remarkably tight movie. There aren't a lot of missteps. And like, there's no, to me there, and I only watched this today, so I have not had time to reflect on it. I've been trying to
That's
watch
fair.
this movie.
It was
for
literally
a week.
hours ago.
I have been trying to watch this movie for like 10. Yeah, I've been trying to watch this movie
hours
for
ago. I'm sure Ethan's gonna message me like 2
10
weeks from now and be
days.
like, ideas.
I've been trying to watch this movie for 10 days and it just has not happened. But
I
the
know.
story is remarkably tight. And I have two thoughts about this, and neither, and like, I have two thoughts, and so I have two thoughts about this. One is that you don't see 90-minute movies anymore.
Well,
As-
well, this was a little longer than that, wasn't it?
100
Is it not?
1 hour and 27 minutes according to Amazon Prime.
Really?
And and part of that was credits, which I did not watch.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so-
I think I had it on YouTube. It was at least an hour 45.
Oh,
for
that's
me.
it. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. No.
I mean, again, the theatrical release would have been about 10 minutes less.
Yeah.
So if that's the 90 minutes, you know.
Well, no, I watched the director's cut.
Oh, insane. It
But anyway, it was under 2 hours.
well, definitely under 2 hours.
And I'm just really, really impressed at what they did with the time that they used, considering how, like, it's limited in terms of the footprint of the movie. Like, it all takes place in a closed spaceship.
Mhm.
But it's very, very expansive with the ideas.
Yeah.
But it's selective in how it addresses those ideas. So you're not getting dragged off into tangents. The tension is always there.
Yeah.
It
a movie
doesn't
like this.
It doesn't really ever let up.
Yeah, a movie like this, you can really easily lose yourself in the cerebral aspects of it. But it's able to keep. This is a thing I struggle with in my own writing, of struggling with having the conflict be prescient and the tension be high, while you're still also having characters who need to reflect on the situation.
Because it's so easy and fun, honestly, to write tangents. Because
Yes.
there's so many other directions that you could take the story.
Yeah.
Any story, really. So it's this particular film is actually, I think, a really good example of not letting your story dictate where it's going to go.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
again, this is the same thing. The opposite is what I complain about in Babylon 5, but that's a 5-season TV show. This is a less than 2 hour movie where
Right.
you need to know where it ends.
Yeah,
And
you need a beginning and an ending.
and kind of springboarding off of that is because of the nature of the story, not just because of the limited runtime in a film, but also because of the constant memory replacement. Nobody in this movie, except maybe arguably the Richard O'Brien character, who we'll get to, no one is a person. Everyone is everyone's a character archetype.
Yeah.
But it works because that it plays to the film's advantage, because due to the nature of what the strangers are doing, everyone is just a blank slate.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that you bring that up, because there are aspects of every character you meet being an archetype. And then there's an additional thing that's like, but that's not an archetype move.
No.
This is one of the differences with the director's cut. We see a lot more of these. In the theatrical version, you still get that same front desk clerk as the newspaper salesman saying the same catchphrase of no days off for good behavior. And so there's this commonality of like, oh, but do you really change a person? You also have the Baumstadt talking about Emma fiddling with her ring like she's not used to it, which is always one of my favorite giveaways, because then you watch it again and you're like, oh my God, it's because she's not used to it, because she isn't even married.
No, it's like, there's only so much you can do with muscle memory.
Yeah.
How do you reprogram muscle memory?
I also love that Bumstead like knows how to play the accordion. And I'm like, is that part of the programming, or is that like he has an accordion and he just knows how to play it?
Yeah, like again, that's almost another instance. That's another instance of muscle memory.
Right?
I wonder if that's, and I can't say, I don't think I could say the same thing necessarily for the catchphrase, but if that's like the one thing you're able to hang on to through all of your different imprintings and erasures. I do wonder if they all have at least one trait.
Yeah. It's interesting that there are certain lines that they repeat, and then there are certain lines that they don't. So like the front desk clerk will always say, I told him cash on the barrelhead, because both of them say that. But like the first guy who did it of just no days off for good behavior, is that just him, who he is? And then it also begs the question of like, if these people, like this is the kind of movie where I love to think about like what happened before, and I start trying to figure out like what is currently happening. So it's like, do you have a finite number of times you can run this experiment? Like you've had dozens of lives, but number 13 is the one that doesn't quite stick right.
Yeah.
And it's like you have the Emma character, you have Bumstead, and you have Murdoch, all kind of starting to see things unravel. You have Eddie, who's already kind of figured it out.
Incidentally,
poor Eddie.
Poor Eddie. We got sidetracked from this, but so Eddie, can't remember his last name. What was his last name?
Walensky.
Eddie Walensky, who was the detective on the Streetwalker serial killer case that starts off the movie, and basically lost his mind, or seems to have lost his mind, because he's figured out what's going on. He has at least figured out that there are people controlling the city, and that
there's no way out.
There's no way out of the city.
Sun.
There's no sun, and there's no way out of the city. And so he takes the only way out he can do, which is to jump in front of a subway train and end his life. And
yeah. Not before meeting Murdoch, but...
And not before meeting Murdoch and telling him a little bit of what's going on, and then throwing himself in front of a train while Murdoch watches in absolute horror. But...
Well, I mean, and that's the end of the line for Eddie, right? Because it's like his career, which wasn't even real to begin with, is ruined.
Yep.
His marriage, which wasn't even real to begin with, is ruined. No one believes him. They just think he should be committed. And so it's just kind of like, all right, I've been riding the subways for like a week, and there's no way out, so I'm just going to make my own way out. Yep.
But it's like, what happens when the character archetype becomes a character?
Yeah. I love Eddie for all the reasons of just like, like justice for Eddie. I feel really bad.
Justice for Eddie.
But I love him for all the reasons of like, if you also sort of take this into a more meta space of like, if John Murdoch was supposed to lose his memories, and like you were supposed to have a very paranoid detective kind of figure it all out, but nobody believes him, so why would he talk to John? And you were supposed to have all these, you were supposed to have the detective who was very by the book, who was very detail oriented, not believe Walensky when he told him what was happening. It has this interesting meta narrative of like, yes, you were always going to meet a Walensky who was awakened and could not bear to be awakened, and was just like, don't let him catch you, brother, and ended it.
Yeah. And I had a thought. Okay, two thoughts. Just Walensky killing himself brings up a question to me of, there are children in this city. We have the two kids of the working class family who suddenly become millionaires overnight, quite literally, and also the sex worker who is killed not by John. There's a daughter in it might be her daughter, we don't know. But there is a kid in her flat.
Uh-huh.
Are these kids, like, were they born in the city? Are they in the same weird age stasis as everybody else probably is? Like,
I mean, maybe there's a weird timeline, right? Because if you go by what Schreiber describes as you've had dozens of lives before this, and you go by how things change so quickly, I mean, who is to say that they weren't just abducted like 2 months ago?
yeah.
You know? Like, it's a very interesting, like, yeah, you just have rats in a maze and they hit a wall. Great. Restart. Put the rat back at the beginning and do it again.
Yeah.
You know, which is why I love that he has a rat maze in the film, because I'm just like, oh boy.
Yeah, that's like his second scene, too.
Yeah.
It's like,
I love that so much.
That's like, I didn't actually pick up on that until right now. Crap. Damn.
Oh, the rat in a maze?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't.
If you watch it again, you can see that the maze is built like a circle.
Yeah.
Like, it's actually built like the way there's sort of a sister version of that map that the strangers are actually looking at when they're trying to figure out their next experiment. So it's
God.
like, it's literal. He is literally looking at the experiment they're doing to be like, okay, if this, then that. And I think the nature of those experiments is so quick, because you don't have a lot of room for people to have have any kind of longevity of life.
Yeah.
Like, why would it, like, no one's going to grow old with someone in this place.
Yeah.
Like, why would they? The strangers don't have time for that, right?
Yeah. And it's also just very, I can't imagine that people's brains are going to be that resilient.
This flexible,
That's like neuroplasticity in a human brain is a remarkable thing, but you are injecting a brand new set of memories every single night.
Yeah.
But not to everybody.
Well, that's what I mean, right?
Not
like,
everybody gets
through.
reset. Yeah, not everybody
like, it
gets
cycles
imprinted.
through. Let's say if you have, I don't know, let's say you have 2,000 people in this city. I think people are cycling through maybe like a week of individual lives, and then it resets.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of an interesting idea of, like, because Schreiber was like, you were never a child here.
Yes.
So it's like, we already know that it's like, okay, so it's not like, and he's not, insert age number here, and he's not 35, and he hasn't been here for 35 years. Like, they weren't grown here, but right. I would wonder if any of them had children while on the ship, because in theory some of those pairings would have caused offspring. So I don't necessarily know if that's like, if they stop it before that happens, because they don't want to change the experiment and add an infant into the scenario. So It does bring up an interesting question of, like, this, I don't know, if Danielle was here, it'd be like, how old is this child? I don't know, 7 years old, 6, 7, feels right. Like,
Ish.
I would imagine the kids are like more of the quote unquote street urchin kids, like the kids who are sort of forgotten, probably don't get as much into the experiments as kids who automatically have like 2 parents built in. Like, I wonder if that family unit is just a family unit, and they're like, great, we have a nuclear family, let's like mess with that, as opposed to just a kid who just gets like tossed from adult to adult to adult.
I had a thought and it went away.
Sorry.
No, come back, little thought. Anyway, Schreiber, I want to talk about Schreiber for a minute.
Yeah.
So Schreiber is Schreiber could have been your quintessential sci-fi / monster movie mad scientist. He has a mild deformity. He has a mild speech impediment. He limps. He's working for the bad guys. He has got like Frankenstein's laboratory type equipment.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been.
He says he has a weak heart. I'm not 100% sure how weak of a heart he has.
I don't think he does. He gets tossed around a lot.
Yeah.
He gets beat up a lot. But it would have been very easy to make this character into a villain. Into just
Absolutely, yeah.
a henchman. But, like, not only does he have the same tragic backstory as everybody else in the city,
Uh-huh.
arguably he has the most tragic backstory. Because he knows what's going on.
Yeah.
But basically he was spared because the strangers needed someone, as he put it, with my artistry. Somebody who understood how human memories function and how they go together. And, clearly in this, it might even be that he developed this technology. If we're going for like a 1930s style, if we assume that they came from the 30s, let's just run with that for a second. It's very, very like ray gun gothic sort of styling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also very 30s, 40s kind of technological conceit that you could extract memories like chemicals. And then mix them up and put them back together. So the strangers needed him to be able to do this work for them. And in return, he was allowed to keep his own personality. He is exactly who he was when he was taken. Except they forced him to erase his memories of everything from before the city.
Uh-huh.
He knows what's going on. He knows how the experiment started. He has no memory of what happened before. And the thing that I actually like about this movie is that they can't get that back.
Yeah.
There is no going back.
Yeah. It's very much like, now this is just a human colony on what might be a space station. What I always imagined is actually a spaceship. But essentially just idling in space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the engines on that are way too powerful for that just to be a space.
It's not meant to be. I don't think it's meant to be stationary.
Yeah, I don't think it's meant to be stationary either.
But again, it would have been so easy. And conversely, segue, it would also have been very easy to make Richard O'Brien's character, Mr. Hand, into a sympathetic character by the end of the movie.
Uh-huh.
Because, so, Mr. Hand is our sort of main mover among the strangers. He's not the leader, but he's kind of...
I always think about him as like an Iago type.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. He is a doer.
Yeah.
He gets things done. He gets things done. And they are looking for Murdoch specifically because when Schreiber went to imprint him with a new set of memories, Murdoch woke up during the procedure and he busted the syringe and it ended up just erasing his memories of...
Yeah. Well, he only got, like, the idea, like, if you were going to get 100 cc's, he only got, like, 10.
Yeah. So he has little bits and flashes of memory.
Exactly.
But nothing concrete.
No.
And the person that he was before actually was a horrifying serial killer.
Well,
I believe that's the implication.
I think,
they wanted him to have the memories of all of these murders.
The syringe John Murdoch is a serial killer.
Yeah.
I don't think before actually, like, imprinting him, I think he was a completely different person.
All right.
And so we just don't know who that person was. For all we know, that person was also a paranoid detective and just ended up,
Yeah.
in.
But they gave him enough of the syringe where he's getting these little bits and flashes of, meeting sex workers and things are happening. But meanwhile, all of the murders that personality is meant to have committed are in the detective's memories. And they're in the not the murders, but the knowledge of the murders. Like,
oh, sorry, yeah.
Everybody else has been imprinted with the knowledge that these murders have occurred.
They're in Eddie Walensky's.
Yes.
They're in Eddie Walensky, and Eddie Walensky left a bunch of paperwork to show Bumstead all the rest of those murders.
Like, all of these murders have been foreshadowed very hard.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so the next step in the Stranger's plan is, okay, now we need a murderer.
Yes.
And it was supposed to be John Murdoch. John didn't get the full syringe. He doesn't know that he's meant to be a serial killer.
Yeah, no.
But Mr. Hand, the Richard O'Brien Stranger, thinks so, and the reason that they're looking for John is because when they went to, like, again, he woke up during the procedure, he smashed the syringe, he passed out, and then when he runs away and some of the strangers go back and go after him, he does the tuning thing that they can do.
Yes.
He does.
So
it's
the
like
strangers,
a telekinetic, telepathic mind power thingy.
Yeah, he has, his biggest clue is something called Shell Beach,
yes,
which is a place that does not exist, but instead is like a memory implanted to be like, remember the good old days kind of thing of like when we used to go to Coney Island, which is how I think about Shell Beach. And he goes up to a billboard of Shell Beach, which I personally love. I don't know if I've actually talked about this very much on the podcast, but I work in advertising printing, and I love looking at that thing because I just sit there and I go, that cost a ton of money because it's like metal, it's got moving parts, like, oh, no. Like, first of all, that's maybe in Vegas, maybe, if you get all the permitting.
Yeah.
Like,
it's like an old Joe Camel billboard.
Yeah. But like, and it has moving parts to it with like full-on crank stuff, which I also thought was amazing. Like the woman on the beach, her hand actually waves, and her hand is like 4 times the size of a normal person. But he's up there, and that's when he sort of finds all those news clippings in his jacket, and that's when the strangers sort of come upon him, and they're like, "Cool, so glad you know who you are. Maybe you should go to sleep now." And he resists going to sleep, which is the first time that they realize, oh, something's different. And then he tunes so that one of them falls through the pieces of wood on the scaffold. And they're like, oh, he can tune. That's a problem.
This is bad. And he actually ends up killing one of them by accident because one of them gets scalped by the hand, basically.
Yeah. His head almost comes off, and then the thing inside his head dies.
Yes, I think Richard O'Brien character, I think Mr. Hand says, it's almost a throwaway line. It says later that the slug looking things that are the actual aliens. I think they said, we're inhabiting your dead.
Yeah.
They are they're all corpses.
Your dead are our vessels.
Yeah. So you find out at the end this is also a zombie movie.
Yeah. That happened. I believe that happened somewhere in the middle, and I'm just like, what a great thing to drop somewhere in the middle of this movie.
And then never mention again.
No, now we really need to go.
Yeah.
Well, I also love speaking of the Richard O'Brien character, which I know, I'm so sorry, we will eventually get to your point
We'll get there someday, but we need to talk about the Richard O'Brien character.
Yeah. I'll slide it in that I believe the direction you were going in with it is that Mr. Hand now has all of Murdoch's memories because they were trying to find Murdoch, and Murdoch doesn't have any of his memories, so everyone else is like, what are you doing? But he's like, no. He has enough to try and follow the breadcrumbs to figure out his life, and as he does that, we will find him along that trail because I have all the breadcrumbs. I've got it all up here.
Yep. But
and
what kind of
go ahead.
But what ends up happening is that, number one, now Mr. Hand has all the memories of a serial killer committing a bunch of horrific murders against sex workers. I believe he, in fact, commits one against the one sex worker that we see, the one with the little girl. But he also talks to Emma.
Yeah.
And he has this really interesting... they have this kind of side-by-side sort of conversation where they're not really talking to each other, but they're talking with, like, in tandem with each other. Because she's talking about John, and Mr. Hand is talking about her as though he is John.
Yeah.
And it's just very, okay, you have this alien creature who is now possessed of a bunch of an entire human life. It's a serial killer, which is bad. But
that's not good.
That is not a good thing. But and it's actually really funny because some of the other strangers are just like, can you please stick to the point? We are trying to find this man, not relive him. You're scaring us. The point I'm trying to get to, I'll get there eventually, is that it would have been so easy to make this character sympathetic. He's full of human memories and emotions now. He is not happy about it. It doesn't make him a better person. It just pisses him off, and it makes him bitter.
Yeah, I think you get whispers of this. Like, whispers of that kind of happen earlier, right? I love especially, like, he's petty. Mr. Hand is petty. Like,
so
Mr.
petty.
Hand shows up at the pool where Schreiber is and literally moves the ladder because he's mad at him. So he, like, tunes the ladder to a different point on the pool so he has to, like, swim back across to use it.
And tells the doctor, you look like you need exercise.
Yeah.
You have to haul
ableist.
Yourself out of the pool now. He has
ableist gentleman.
Yeah, very ableist, because as I mentioned before, Schreiber has a disabled leg.
Yeah. It's kind of
such a bitch.
It's just in terms of understanding an alien race and understanding, like, I think Mr. Hand has a level of freedom when he gets John Murdoch's memories of, because that is part of that conversation. What he talks to Emma about is, like, imagine being part of a collective with all these individual, like, memories that just are yours, but you've never experienced them. And now you have a whole different option in front of you, right?
Yeah, but and then you have that sort of wistfulness, that wanting. And it's not, I was actually very worried when that happened that they were going to go in the direction of him wanting Emma. But, he knows better, clearly. But what did surprise me was that instead of this making him more sympathetic to the human experimental subjects and, like, horrified at what they're doing, it makes him
more monstrous.
It makes him more monstrous because it makes him, in recognizing what humans have that his own species does not, it just makes him angry. It makes him very vindictive. Yeah.
Well, I think also, I think we're kind of tossing around, like, serial killer a lot, but, like, serial killers lack empathy.
Yeah.
And by the end of Mr. Hand's journey, he is just a manipulative person. And I think that also will not yield you any sympathy points, because it's just like, it's right. But if you have all of John Murdoch's memories and you've made a serial killer, you also understand that eventually this monster was going to kill his wife.
Yeah.
So he doesn't care. He doesn't care. He could kill Emma right now. And it's like he just uses that against John because, again, the manipulation is going to win him more than any kind of emotional commitment to this. I do like that Mr. Hand calls it instincts and not exactly feelings. Because what he's experiencing are, like, instincts more than, I think, a humanity.
Yeah. And I love that that's the direction the movie took.
Yeah. Because I agree with you.
The opposite would have been very
sympathetic.
Easy. Yeah. And it's interesting when you bring up empathy. It's actually very interesting because at the beginning-ish, the first time we really see the collective of strangers, there is a hint of empathy in the collective because one of them has been killed. And you have this one who looks so sad, and he's just going, poor Mr. I don't remember what his name was, but he looks so sad.
I believe it was Quick, which is so unfortunate because, like, how dare Mr. Quick be the one to die? Like, there's an irony in that.
Have you never heard the phrase, the quick and the dead?
No, I know. It's just like, poor Mr. Quick.
Poor Mr. He just sounds so lugubrious and sad, just like an undertaker. Poor Mr. Quick.
I'm pretty sure he also is the same one to say poor Mr. somebody just before they're talking about, like, we've tried this before and it doesn't, like, it's a death sentence, imprinting yourself with human memories.
Mm-hmm.
Which that's one of the changes in the theatrical release. That conversation is much, much shorter. And so he doesn't even get the poor Mr. cut off. Which I'm just like, no, you need this here. You need to know that there's one ooh-woo stranger whose thoughts and prayers. You need that guy.
As opposed to the one stranger who is inhabiting the body of a small child and who is vicious and bloodthirsty and creepy.
I love Mr. Sleep. Mr. Sleep is great. Mr. Sleep is, by the way, played by twins, a boy and a girl. And I think at some point in an interview, Alex Proyas was asked, like, what was the most difficult thing filming with the children? And I think he said something like, we were very nervous about shaving the little girl's head. Because I think, like, the cap wouldn't have made sense. Yeah. So it was just like, I guess we're going to have to shave her head. Shave her head.
And the other thing is that the kid in the scene on the scaffold when John first encounters the strangers, one of the kids is with them, and the child doesn't talk, clicks. He's just
he clicks.
It's this insectoid sort of clicking coming out of the mouth, and later on, all of the strangers in the collective hive basically do that, and it's skin crawly.
Yeah. It's a very, for aliens that look like people because they are using our dead, it's very alien. It's a very alien move.
Yeah. Okay, do we need to talk about Mr. Hand? We need to mention Mr. Hand in the context of his actor.
Yes, well, you're probably more equipped for that. Well, you're talking about Mr. Book.
No,
right?
I haven't gotten to Mr. Book yet. I'm talking about Mr. Hand. I'm talking about Richard O'Brien.
Yeah, Richard O'Brien. Are we not currently talking about him?
We haven't mentioned who he is. Richard O'Brien is Riff Raff from Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Sorry, yes. My brain is just like, hey, if you don't know who he is, check him out. You've got the Google in your pocket.
Richard O'Brien is Riff Raff from the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which makes this at least the second movie where he has played a bald/semi-bald alien flying a spaceship that doesn't look anything like a spaceship.
Yeah, Mr. Hand, the character of Mr. Hand, Proyas drew inspiration from Richard O'Brien as Riff Raff. Because of, like, it's very close to, it's basically like, this is my dream casting for this role, and then he managed to get it.
Filming in Australia probably helped.
Yes.
Yeah.
Probably.
Mr. Book, who is the leader of the Strangers, is played by the late great David Warner. Who made so many movies like this.
Yeah.
This is like I feel like this is the zenith of... Zenith is the wrong word. I feel like this is a weird natural progression for his character acting to come up from... to drawing a line backwards.
Is that David Warner?
From this to the MCP in Tron.
Right? I didn't realize that was David Warner.
That is 110% David Warner with a bald cap.
Are we sure?
I am. Yes. I would recognize that voice in the middle of the Sahara Desert.
Okay. Well, I wonder if it's... Interesting. I wonder if maybe it's ADR? Because IMDb is having that as Ian Richardson.
I'm gonna be very upset with myself. Hang on a second.
Because, again, I would have recognized David Warner also. I would have been
like,
wait, hang on.
You know what? I am very disappointed with myself. This is another, Ethan saw an old British man that he's seen in a bunch of other things.
I mean, white guy blindness. It's fine.
Well, he's very white in this movie.
Very white.
Okay. Do we want to keep this in, or do we want to preserve my humiliation for posterity?
Well, I can leave it up to you. When I edit this episode, you can decide.
Shame, listeners. Okay, yes, it is Ian Richardson, and there must be some reason why I assumed this was David Warner.
Well, I know he's done From Hell, like he's done a bunch of
okay, you know what?
On-ball kind of
all right,
things.
no, you know what it was? I'm looking at a picture of Mr. Book, and you know what it was? In this role, it was the jowls.
Sure.
Because I'm actually not used to Ian Richardson having jowls. David Warner, on the other hand, as he aged, started to resemble a bloodhound.
Yes.
So, mea culpa.
It's funny because I'm like, Ian Richardson is just so out of my purview. There's a level of British insert whatever that I am just not a part of.
Ian Richardson has also been in a number of my favorite like BBC adaptations, so I'm genuinely mortified right now. Check if you've never seen it. Check him out in the BBC adaptation of Mervyn Peake's novel Gormenghast.
Oh,
which was also, I think, the property along with Bend It Like Beckham that introduced Jonathan Rhys-Meyers to popular view.
Oh, interesting.
That is also a star-studded cast, by the way.
It sounds like.
Yeah,
I haven't seen that one, but it sounds fun.
Christopher Lee is in it.
I mean, we love some Christopher Lee.
We do love us some Christopher Lee, and a lot of British staples.
So what's interesting is he was in a production of Midsummer Night's Dream with David Warner.
Oh no!
So Ian Richardson played Oberon, and David Warner played Lysander. So I'm almost wondering if
the doubling was intentional.
Yeah.
They had yeah. Okay. I feel slightly less embarrassed.
Please don't feel bad. I can't even tell you how many times Danielle and I on this very podcast have been like, I don't know, man, I think it's just like white man faces. Sometimes they just blend together.
Old British white guy blindness.
Specifically old British white men blindness. Usually they're British, usually they're white. I don't know what else to tell you. Especially during the terror season, it was very funny to try to keep everyone straight.
Yeah.
So please don't feel bad about that. Totally understood.
So by the end of the movie, John has A, become God, and B, created Asgard.
Yes, basically.
As seen in the Marvel movies, because he takes the spaceship city and surrounds it with an ocean. Because he wants to get to the beach, damn it.
I know. He just wants a beach day.
He just
John Murdoch
just wants his little beach day.
In constant search of a beach day.
But he has this mass, like, he finally gets captured. Well, first, he and William Hurt basically kidnap Dr. Schreiber and make him take them to where Shell Beach is. And that involves a rowboat, because there was a bridge and now there isn't. Which I guess got demolished during the last tuning.
That's one of those jokes of like Bumstat not entirely being on board and not 100% understand what's happening, and he's like, there used to be a bridge here.
There used to be a bridge here. And it's during this little boat ride that Schreiber is telling the backstory of how this all happened.
Yeah.
And all the while, John's tuning abilities are growing, but they're all reflexive. They're all defensive. It's not something he can super duper control without concentrating really hard. Like there's the scene in the police station where he and Emma are separated by a pane of glass, and he touches the glass and deliberately shatters it.
Yeah.
But they get to Shell Beach, and it's basically a paste up of that same billboard.
Yeah.
On a wall.
Which is so depressing.
It's so depressing. And then, Murdoch and Baumgartner find some pipes, and they start ripping the paste up off, and they're beating at the bricks behind it, and they're just trying to see what's on the other side. And they finally claw through these bricks, and what they see is space. Just deep space.
Not just space, right? Like where the force field meets the city.
Yeah.
Like the vacuum of space.
Well, the where the force field meets the city is about 10 feet out.
Yeah.
As we see later, sadly.
Yeah. Well, like this aura of force field that is just like, please don't lean too far out, which Bumstead learns the hard way. Yes,
it's very much a please stay behind the yellow line kind of situation. And that's, Richard O'Brien shows up, Mr. Hand shows up with Emma, who John doesn't care about but does care about.
Yeah. Well, again, this is after the police station, which... I love the love story in this because you have Emma's character who is already, quote unquote, already in love with John Murdoch. But even Emma admits that, like, well, when you were in the apartment yesterday, I did kind of feel like a stranger was there. And Murdoch is like, yeah, see, exactly. Like, we don't know each other. And she has to say, like, But it's so strong. Like, it's so strong within me that I love you. And I can't, like, you can't fake this. Yeah. And John has this beautiful, like, no, you can't fake that of like, and I have this moment of how much of that is the memories and how much of that is like the person that is Emma falling in love with John Murdoch. Because again, it's like she says the things she needs to say. I especially love the, like, I believe you, where I'm just kind of like, I don't know if your character is meant to believe him when he tells you he's not a serial killer. In fact, I don't know if Murdoch is supposed to, like, say he's innocent. For all I know, you're never supposed to see him again until he's on trial for all these killings.
Well, it does seem like he was intended to have murdered her as well.
Yeah. It definitely seems like that. It also seems like he was definitely set up for the cops to bust him. Like, he was supposed to be there with the fresh body and, like, go through all the stuff. So, like, for all we know, the visiting at the jail would have been like, and then he kills his wife.
Yeah.
Like, because she is so devoted and he has basically checked out because she cheated. Which, I've talked about this with Danielle, I'm pretty sure, on the podcast before, but it's hard to know. It's hard to remember. But it's just like my least favorite thing is like a cheater storyline. This is the only time where I'm like, this is fine, because ultimately it didn't
actually happen.
Yeah, like it didn't actually, like, you never cheated on me, which I think is even a line he says to her. Like, you never had an affair. We're not even married.
Yep.
Like... Anyway, I'm sorry. You were saying.
I don't remember what I was saying.
Hand shows up with Emma.
Hand shows up with Emma and threatens her life because he is, like, fully engrossed in John Murdoch's actual intended memories of being somebody who kills women for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And John is just like, well, I don't care about her. Oh, wait, yes, I do. Like, don't hurt her. Please don't hurt her.
Well, like, I especially love that it's like he realizes that's not going to work because Hand is who he was supposed to be.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. She's going to die.
Yeah. It's like, I could say that she doesn't matter to me because who knows what the aliens think love is, right?
But
like,
if I don't stand down, she is going to die.
Yeah.
And I don't
because
want that.
now she's in the arms of a serial killer.
Yes. So they take Murdoch to the where the collective hive of I keep wanting to say the observers, where the strangers are.
The strangers, the underground hive.
The evil observers, like mirror universe observers.
That was season 5.
I thought that took place in the 40s. And basically what Mr. Book determines is that John is an evolved human, which they hadn't expected. Like, they're like, it takes hundreds of or tens of your generations before humanity actually displays any kind of evolutionary leaps, any evolutionary steps forward. And then they're looking at John and they're like, oh no, he can tune. He has adapted to his environment. This is okay, we can use this. And
my favorite thing is that his fingerprints have changed.
Yeah. I don't know what that means.
His fingerprints are now spirals. That's how they figure that out. Well,
is that what Walensky's deal with the spirals was, and why the...
Well, Walensky's deal with the spirals is the city itself. The spiral is a common theme throughout this.
Yes, but I mean, it was the markings on the murdered women.
It's the markings on the murdered women. It's him trying to figure out the subway system. It's the city itself is a giant spiral.
Uh-huh.
And his Murdoch's fingerprints have changed into spirals.
Okay.
The human fingerprint don't do a spiral. Doesn't do a perfect spiral.
Not like that, no.
No.
It's what it's like what's the spiral? It's like a Junji Ito kind of spiral.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably would have noticed all of this if I hadn't been watching it on my phone.
That's fair.
If I had watched this on
believe it or not, the director's
monitor.
Believe it or not, the director's cut is less frenetic than the theatrical cut. I promise.
That's terrifying.
Yeah,
but also that makes sense. Like, if the theatrical cut made less sense than the director's cut.
Yeah, there's stuff in it that I don't necessarily know quote unquote needs to be there.
Yeah,
but there's stuff in it that I feel adds to the movie, which in my brain is like, this is why this is the version you watch.
Well, if it adds to the movie, then it needs to be there.
Yes, it needs to be there, but it's like, in order to understand the film, I don't know that it adds that. Like, it adds vibes. Like, the little girl from The Prostitute is not in the theatrical release.
Yeah.
Which, again, you don't need her. Not really.
No, but it's the thing with the little girl at the hiding under the bed at the sex worker's flat, is that when Emma coaxes her out from under the bed, the little girl comes with a drawing showing that 3 very pale, tall men in black coats and hats murdered her mother.
Right. But again, like, if you don't have that, then Bumstead doesn't have a reason to believe Murdoch when he talks about these strangers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, like, Bumstead, the only time he sees the strangers is at the very end when he's fighting one. Like, when when Mr. Hand comes in with Emma. Like, he hasn't seen them before.
No.
Well, he saw them weirdly, like, through the haze of a steam vent on the street, which even that scene is shorter in the theatrical release.
Yeah.
It's like, it brings up a really interesting question of, like, is Murdoch just messing with you because you are a cop, and maybe he's just trying to be like, no, really, bro, I'm innocent. Like, maybe you should still be suspicious. Like, you can look at the movie in such a way of, like, Baumstadt trying to understand the mystery and always being paranoid that the mystery is just this guy pulling his leg.
Yeah.
Right?
But I do think the addition of, or the keeping in the film of the little girl and her drawing is a nice addition for Baumstead, just another layer of doubt for him.
Yeah.
And honestly, if this was from his point of view, like if this film was from his point of view, that would be so unsettling.
Yeah.
But they get John into the hive of the strangers, and they decide that he is an evolved form of human. And they're like, oh, okay, we can use him to save our species. The way they're going to use Murdoch to save their species is they are going to have Dr. Schreiber imprint Murdoch with the stranger's entire collective consciousness.
Yeah.
And I want to say there's about 200 of them. Does that sound about right?
Probably. It's hard to know.
It is really hard to tell, but they're in like sort of a high graded tiers in this. It almost looks like an operating theater.
Yeah.
And
I mean, in theory, the collective memories would not be two individual collective memories because they do share memories. So there'd be redundancy. But yeah.
But it's they're going to replace what little memory and personality he has with their own collective memory.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know what they intend to do after that, but that's a different movie. But what Schreiber does instead is that, and he had tried to give Murdoch the syringe before Murdoch and why do I want to say Baumstead kidnapped him. But Murdoch kept the syringe. He had it in his coat. And so when Murdoch is strapped to the torture device operating table, the space camp looking motion sphere, he takes that syringe out of Murdoch's pocket and he injects that instead. And what that was is a new set of memories for Murdoch of being John Murdoch, but with Schreiber embedded in his memories as someone telling him from his earliest childhood how to use and refine his psychic abilities.
Yeah.
To use them against the strangers.
Literally a lifetime of understanding his own power.
It's like Neo downloading Kung Fu.
Yeah.
But
well, like Neo downloading Kung Fu, and then Morpheus literally taught him Kung Fu in the download.
It's
like not just fighting him. Like
he's not just. It's like Neo learning Kung Fu is Neo gaining like instructional tapes and a lot of muscle memory.
Yeah.
John has been given memories, an entirely new set of memories, a complete set of memories with one goal throughout his entire life. So like 35 years of working on how to tune. And he busts out of his restraints and he fights Mr. Book.
Uh-huh.
And it reminds me, that whole final fight scene, which is pretty epic. And I have to say, for a dark movie, this whole movie is actually really well lit.
Yeah.
Like, it's Dark City.
I often watch this movie and I'm just like, how do we forget how to light dark things? Because I can see this movie perfectly fine.
Yeah. It's dark, but oh God.
It's atmospheric as opposed to just dark.
Yes.
Vibes all the way down.
This movie is like 80% vibes and 20% Richard O'Brien being smarmy.
Yes.
But the mind battle at the end is nearly identical to the one at the end of 1992's The Shadow, between Alec Baldwin as the psychic crime fighter, and John Lone's last descendant of Genghis Khan. Have you watched that movie?
It's been a long time.
Can we do? We should do that for this podcast. We should make Danielle watch that. Yeah. But it also
Danielle might have.
and it's also a very similar kind of heightened 1930s aesthetic. So
Sure.
that is actually what this movie reminded me of the most. Like I said, The Matrix, I said Fringe. This reminded me of a dark noir version of The Shadow.
Sure, yeah.
With aliens.
Yeah.
But it's literally just them staring at each other angrily, and things are blowing up.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that the fight starts with John not being very good at it.
Yeah. He learns
like
very quickly.
The very first blow sends him flying off his feet, like into the crowd.
Yep.
And then he's able to sort of volley that against Mr. Book, and then it seems pretty evenly matched.
Yep.
But I love the, like, again, how much of that is the memory, and how much of that is like, okay, but you've never actually practically done this. There's going to be a learning curve.
Well, again, no muscle memory.
No muscle memory.
I mean, I think
absolutely.
If this was an episode in a series, that would be the name of this episode.
No muscle memory?
No muscle memory.
That'd be pretty funny.
Yeah. I think that is the theme of this movie, is that muscle memory is important. Because it will save you from having your personality erased.
It will save you from the evil alien zoo.
Yes. So we have the battle, and John wins. And he can't walk off triumphantly into the sunset because there's no sun. So he says to Schreiber, you said I could create anything. I have the power to create anything just with the force of will. So he just kind of walks away, and he starts, as he's walking away, the city is sort of reforming around him. It's rebuilding. He's not making a new city. He's just repairing it. But you see, you go to the outside of the spaceship, and you see water pouring out of the vents into space, like into presumably where I forgot to say Baumstead dies. He gets thrown out of space.
With one of the strangers. And, at first they're just sort of falling because they're in the force field, and then they fall through the force field, and then they're dead. I do like that Baumstead is the first one, like the first human to actually see the craft that they're all on, like just before he dies.
Yeah.
There's something really poetic about that the first person to actually understand where they are, like on a... Like, to actually see it with their own two eyes, is not Murdoch. And I like that.
Yeah.
I like that Murdoch is like, all of a sudden he sees the machines and he's like, oh.
The best and or worst revelation to have before you die in a vacuum.
I know.
And then Murdoch is just, he's getting to Shell Beach, so he creates an ocean around the city. And then he creates like enormous banks around that ocean with a lighthouse and houses. And I don't know that he creates this. I don't want to know if I want to go that far, but you see a sun starting to rise over the city. The ship is suddenly near a sun.
I believe it's sort of it's a little bit of a throwaway line in the movie. There's something about they won't let the sun rise here.
Yeah.
So I think they keep the ship turned away from the sun. So in theory, you could simply turn the ship towards the sun. What I do think he creates is everything that's beyond those walls. So the houses along the peninsula. Yeah. He creates Shell Beach.
Yes.
In its entirety.
Yes. Because there is nothing beyond the ship. Yeah. Like once you go through the doors and there's nothing there. But so in the meantime, Emma has been re-imprinted with a new personality. So she is Anna now. So we have Anna and John, which is very Babylon 5 vibes. And she just she gets off of her shift at the movie theater and takes a suitcase and gets on a bus and goes to Shell Beach. And that's where John's going. He's going to Shell Beach. And as he's literally just walking through the industrial part of the ship, and he opens a door, and there is the beach. And and behind him in the corridor is Mr. Hand, who seems to be the only one, maybe, we're not sure, but he survived the onslaught. But he tells John, I'm dying. Your imprints, human imprints, are not good for my kind. Something to that effect. And John tells him, you were looking for the human soul. You were looking for what makes humans tick, but you were looking in the wrong place. You were looking up here, and he just points to the center of his forehead, where the imprinting needle goes. You were looking here. And he doesn't say where they should have been looking, which I actually like, because that would have made it very, very twee.
I know. I do like that that's kind of left up to the audience to decide. It's just a very open-ended question.
Yeah.
Because the where is the soul is also a very open-ended human question as well.
Mm-hmm. And then he opens the door to the beach, and you get to see... it's actually really cool. It's Richard O'Brien as Mr. Hand, hissing and drawing back from the light like he's Nosferatu.
Well, this also leads into the other thing I was going to say, where I just feel like these aliens are just very Nosferatu coded.
Yes.
They don't like running water. They don't like sunlight. Like, they're just vampire aliens who are also zombies.
They float.
Their bodies are dead.
Yeah. They float.
Yeah.
They float like the gentleman in Buffy.
Pretty sure a bunch of that was stolen from this. Has to be. Unofficial hot take. Don't at me.
And so John joins Anna, formerly Emma, on a pier. They admire the sun, and then they go off together, and that's the end of the movie. And there's your cat there. Okay.
Probably playing with one of the paper flowers behind me.
Yes. And that's the end of the movie. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the hell out of that movie.
Oh, good. Yay.
I thought
you would, but there was a question again from the level of frenetic that this movie is. There was a question that I was like, it can be a little difficult to follow if you're also like, I mean, just too tired to, like, if it doesn't actually grab your attention, then it feels like a slog, because you're like, well, hang on, how do we get this far? It was just 20 minutes ago we were in a bathtub. What's happening now? You know?
No, it was frenetic to start with, but it actually slowed down just enough after the first few scenes where I got the rhythm of it. So
yeah,
and I was just, as I said earlier, I was so impressed with how tight the story was.
Yeah,
this is one of those films where, leaving aside that there is a theatrical release that is missing 10 minutes of footage, in my opinion, this movie actually falls apart if you remove any of the elements.
That's fair. I would say that's true. It has
it ends up telling a different story.
It tells a different story. Again, the theatrical release tells a different story anyway, because they let the cat out of the bag in the first 10 seconds.
Well, yeah, and the funny thing is, if you're telling that story at the beginning of the movie, then it's not, at that point, it's not a noir anymore. It's just like a chosen one kind of thriller narrative.
Sure, I could see that. Yeah, it reads as a for a very long time I didn't understand this movie as noir, because there were elements of it that I was like, I feel like there's tropes missing if we're talking about noir, which again, like later on I realized that no, they're just trying to marry those tropes with science fiction, which is a very different feel. I think that narration in the beginning was, I don't know whose idea that was. I know Proyas did not want it. He didn't want to release the movie with that in the beginning. He was like, why would we do that? That gives away the whole, like, you don't have a monster movie and talk about the monster in the first 10 seconds. You just don't do that. So I think there is a level of him sort of taking that back in the theatrical cut of like, no, this is why it was supposed to be silent.
Yeah.
And it has a whole different feel as a movie. It definitely comes more across, I would argue the theatrical release is more of a fever dream. There's more, it's little things that are missing in the theatrical release. The poor family dynamic, the conversation that they have before their head kind of falls into the soup is either non-existent or very short.
Yeah.
You still get the conversation after. You still get that, like, I had to fire so-and-so because he was being a prat. You know, you still get that conversation. But the pre-conversation about, like, you know, I asked him to put me on more shifts so I could get more money to blah, 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 blah. And she's like, yeah, you try raising the kids for a minute and see how you feel. You know, like, that conversation is either shortened or gone completely.
Yeah.
So it's like, there's pieces that are missing. The bones are there. But I think the pieces that are missing are just slightly color it a different way. And again, like some of it's like, and then you hit that 90 minutes and it's almost perfect because you hit 90 minutes and it's like the perfect length of movie. But having watched the theatrical release, which I think didn't even come out until like 2008. So like 10 years later, it was like like we're releasing the Blu-ray or whatever with the theatrical release, so it was like a whole hubbub. So like I didn't even see it until many, many years later after only watching the theatrical release, and it was just it was like, oh, this actually makes a lot more sense for the movie you were making. One day I will put on both movies side by side and watch them all the way through at the same time because I am personally convinced that Proyas not only switched around some of the scenes but when they take place, like meeting Schreiber at the pool and confronting him after the pool somehow happens then, as opposed to sorry. The Bomstad, like, coming to talk to him, and then we cut to the pool. For some reason, that's not that same order in the theatrical release. Like, I think this was actually, like, dissected and repositioned. But again, I'll never actually know that until I watch them side by side. But the biggest differences are, like, there's a few lines that they just straight up lifted and, you know, didn't even have in there. I believe there's a line or two that they added where he's practicing his name in that reflection and like slowly going crazy because he has no frame of reference. So, and there's that dude that's just like, huh, you know, like watching him.
Yep.
And I think, I can't remember if this was actually in the director's cut, but there's like something he says as he walks away, which was just like, I'm losing my freaking mind, you know, and then like that's in the theatrical cut, but not in the director's cut, you know, like there's a bunch of little tiny pieces here and there that I'm just like, I don't know what you did, but you somehow improved the movie like 15% by just playing like mahjong with all the pieces of your film. You clacked and shuffled them around and then you put them back into position. It's like, just for some reason, like, in my opinion, worlds better. I'm very curious to show you the opening with the narration, just so you can understand like how much it takes away from the stakes immediately.
I'm just thinking about that and going like, okay, you just ruined the movie.
Yeah. But again, like, that was all
started.
That was all I had.
Yeah.
So I didn't even understand really that we were ruining the movie. Again, it felt more in the vein, like, I wonder what producer was just like, this is in the vein of like a Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Like, you have now stepped into the world of the bizarre. And I'm like, But that's not the thing he says.
Yep. And like, just as a very pedantic nitpick, if it was the Twilight Zone, the reveal of the strangers as keepers of a human zoo would have been the end of the movie.
Right.
It would have been like Planet of the Apes, where you
right.
fought,
But
which incidentally written by Rod Serling, so of course it feels like a Twilight Zone episode.
So of course it feels like a Twilight Zone episode. I Planet of the Apes is. This is like finding out that Death Becomes Her was supposed to be a Tales from the Crypt episode, and I'm like, suddenly this movie makes a million more sense. I don't know how. I don't know where they found it, but they have shined it upon me.
Okay, so a friend of mine showed me that movie and expected me to love it, and I'm just like, this is tonally everything I dislike. And
that's fair.
And but realizing that it was meant to be, it was originally going to be the Tales from the Crypt episode, it was like, that makes so much sense now.
It's meant to be campy and awful and bad special effects and terrible writing. And I'm just like, everything about this
about it makes so much
more sense now.
Yep, a million more.
A million more. I think we're at one more things.
I think I might have said all my one more things. Give me a second.
Oh, I do have a one more thing about the trains. They added in a fun little sound effect, which was like a cat, like that sound effect number 6 of like a cat going "Ow" to the train. And I just thought that was very funny. And I was like, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this because I heard it every single time the train passed by.
Trying to think. Okay, so my one more thing was originally going to be talking about how the fight at the end reminded me of the fight at the end of The Shadow. But again, there are other things in this movie because The Shadow came out in 1991, 1992.
Yeah.
So it's not impossible that there could have been an influence here and there. Unlikely, but not impossible. I just find it amusing that the vibes of the city are very similar, just a lot darker, obviously.
Yeah.
The CGI quality of the city, where it's not Uncanny Valley.
Sorry, but I'll be remiss if I'm sure there are already probably people starting to tweet about this. Please don't tweet this at me. I just looked it up to confirm. The reason you're getting the 40s vibe is because it was highly influenced by the 40s and 50s film noir, like Maltese Falcon.
Sure.
I was sitting here trying to remember the movie that it was like, I know we've referenced the movie that it was like not based on because it's a completely different thing, but like as for like vibes and inspiration, highly influenced by stuff of that era.
Oh, sure.
So it's like, in other words, like you've clocked it.
Yeah. Maltese Falcon, 1941. That's almost still the 30s. It wasn't the world. The war hadn't started. For
I always
Americans
counted
yet.
by fives.
Yeah.
Like 1985 is still technically 80s.
Yes.
It's 70s.
You're pushing it. You're pushing it at that point, but 41 is still the 30s. I'm sorry, the Depression hadn't ended in the U.S. yet. It's still the 30s.
Exactly.
But similar sort of 30s vibe, similar off-putting, but in a way you can't put your finger on, kind of CGI, where everything looks a little bit like clay.
Uh-huh.
Is kind of the best way I can describe it. And oh god, my brain just shorted. Sorry.
It's okay.
But also when Jennifer Connelly's character is introduced as like a lounge singer or a club singer, and she's singing
Sway?
She is singing Sway, which is not a song from the 30s as far as I'm aware. And then now you're looking it up. but
I
it's,
am, yeah.
it's
I recently learned that sway is actually a like one of those culturally, like, we're gonna borrow this cultural folk melody, but we're gonna change the lyrics.
Yep.
So sway is actually in fact older than like the sway that we know.
Sway, is that Sway With Me?
Yeah, sway with me.
The first
Sway with me or just sway.
Yeah. The first one that I am seeing, and this is on Wikipedia, so that doesn't really count, but the earliest one I'm seeing is 1958.
Yeah, I think there's Quincera, which is the I think it's originally Spanish or Italian.
Yeah, which is it's Mexican.
Yeah, 1954 is Dean Martin. But
Yeah.
again, it was of the era that's like, cool, we like your melody, we're gonna tweak that for American audiences.
Yeah.
You know, because in the original, I'm pretty sure it's like a woman is like, get the hell away from me, I'm gonna murder you or something.
Yeah.
Like,
In The Shadow, you're not introduced, but you start to get more of a feel for The Shadow's Playboy alter ego. You go to like a 1930s jazz club, and there's a singer,
Mhm.
but the song she is singing is very much not a song of the time. It was written, all of the music, and I believe all of the songs with lyrics were written by Jim Steinman. So, Mr. Meatloaf and Dance of the Vampires.
oh, the second song, you mean?
I think, no, in The Shadow, not in this movie.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
But it's just that
Yeah, this is very much like when you watch
it's the
like
same.
you watch Dirty Dancing, and it's like, that song was not written at the time this movie was made.
Absolutely not. It's just that very sort of, I feel like I'm watching something that's been soundtracked by Postmodern Jukebox.
Sure, yeah.
But I just
Interesting tidbit.
Yes.
The two times that Jennifer Connelly sings in the director's cut, it's her voice. The theatrical cut, I believe, was a different singer.
I believe it. Like it definitely sounded like her voice in this one. It also, interestingly, knowing how the movie progresses, she doesn't look comfortable up there.
Nope. Which is pretty great because,
Yeah.
again, like, why are you playing with your wedding ring?
Yep. Well, at the when I watched it initially, I'm just like, oh no, I don't think Jennifer. It doesn't look like Jennifer Connelly was prepared to be playing a singer. But, yeah, it was Emma who was not prepared to be singing because she's she's never done this before.
Which is why it always feels a little, like talking about Uncanny Valley, it always feels a little weird when the professional singer is singing on the theatrical version.
Yeah.
Because it does feel very lounge, like she plays up the, like a flower bending in the breeze, bend with me. And I'm like, that is not what Jennifer is doing on stage.
No, she looks very, not wooden,
like timid,
but timid, stiff, uncomfortable. Yeah. She looks uncomfortable.
She does look uncomfortable, which is why, like, I love it on so many levels. It works so much better, especially with her own voice doing it.
I feel like this is a movie that is going to repay rewatching.
Yes, it certainly does. And I will say this, the director's cut pays dividends rewatching it.
Yes.
The theatrical cut pays less. But like one of my favorite things is still and if you
combine watching them, you may be the one paying.
I might go crazy, like our poor Eddie. But like the one of my favorite sort of pieces of that is that, like, it will have dividends, but the dividends will be different.
Will you be able to reinvest them? Answer unclear.
Well, because again, it's like the director's cut. With that's what it was. The original point I was going to make is after finishing becoming Superman, he has a whole part where he's talking about the working on Murder, She Wrote and writing mysteries, and how you're supposed to have everything about the mystery in the very first scene so that when people watch it again, they can go, you know, and like having that moment watching the director's cut again, where yes, the light is swinging because Schreiber knocks into it when he runs away. The needle is broken because he dropped it. You know, it's like all those little pieces of just like, oh, we are literally coming in on the scene right after a thing happened.
Yep. It is very much, you know, we're starting in media res, and Murdoch has no idea what the media is.
Yeah. And neither do the rest of us.
No.
That's what I love the most about this, is that we get to unfold the mystery with Murdoch.
Yeah.
And fully understand it. But I think that covers all the things I wanted to talk about.
I do believe so.
Ethan, where can the people find you?
I can be found at patreon.com/Ethan Quincy. I can be found at ethanquincy.bluesky.social at bluesky. And if you are a coward, you can find me on tumblr.com at Gaslight Gallows, where I am unhinged. If you're into that.
Unhinged Ethan is best Ethan. I'm just going to come out and say it right now. Say it with your whole chest.
I am unhinged.
If you're not a coward.
If you're not a coward.
Just calling out the audience. And thank you so much for listening. We would love to hear from you. Please check out Binge O'Clock Pod on Twitter and Facebook, where you can answer the question, if you were a stranger, what noun would be your name? You can also email us at bingeoclockpod@gmail.com. And don't forget, we have a Patreon. Find us at patreon.com/BachPod. And tell your friends, tell your family, tell your loved ones, tell the live lobsters in your life about Binge O'Clock, and we will see you next time.